It's my real pleasure to welcome to the stage James Mangold.
The idea of where it all started, to make a kind of Star Wars Zero, if you will, and kind of where was the Force born? To me, a movie always has to have a question to answer, some singular thing that you can say, oh, it's about. And to me, this is about this discovery.
A few moments later.
I don't want to make any guarantees one way or another.
Much later.
Hey guys, hello and welcome back to another Star Wars video. It is I coming at you once again, your friend and your favourite galactic hostess, Star Wars Meg. And today, I hope you're ready to talk about some juicy, loosey-goosey Star Wars updates, because we're talking about the future of Star Wars on the big screen. Behind the scenes, the new Lucasfilm led by Dave Filoni and Lin Brennan might have just cancelled James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi. Arguably one of Lucasfilm's most ambitious projects. Some fans are going to hate this news, while others are going to say, good riddance. But let's dive into all of the details, and if you haven't done so already, my friends, please be sure to hit the big subscribe button down below, ring the bell for notifications, but no more jibber jabber. Shall we talk about this? Let's dive straight in. So ever since Kathleen Kennedy stepped down, it was very obvious that at some point, Dave Filoni was going to have to make some very tough choices. The very future of Star Wars content, both movies and shows, rest in his hands. He isn't just co-president, he's CCO. So while Kennedy herself had a future of Star Wars lined up, it's up to Dave what he's going to keep from those projects and what he's going to can. What's going to fade away into irrelevancy? There's the Lando project, Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron, I suppose Rian Johnson's trilogy, the Rey movie, and the one we're talking about today, Dawn of the Jedi, by Beau Willimon, one of the writers on Andor, and James Mangold, a good friend of Kathy, a good friend of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, and the director of Indiana Jones 5, which in and of itself is a big reason some fans do not have faith in this project. But today, my friends, Dawn of the Jedi might be dead, despite the script still being worked on as recently as October of 2025. But it turns out, according to a brand new report, Dave Filoni is being very hands-on. He's already cancelling movies, and Dawn of the Jedi is the first on the chopping block. And if this is true, it already demonstrates a difference of vision, because Kathleen Kennedy had a lot of faith in this project. Now granted, some of Mangold's comments over the last few years have been worrying fans. It was very clear he was going to rewrite Jedi history, so for fans of the expanded universe version of events, he was not going to use the same characters, the same backstory, and the same events. They were about to retell the entire thing from scratch, which on the one hand can be very exciting. You might end up with an Andor level of quality, but on the other, it's a major risk. And after the Dial of Destiny, a lot of fans didn't want James Mangold to touch another Lucasfilm property ever again. And what was evident is that instead of using the Dawn of the Jedi comics and the books, Mangold was taking from Rian Johnson's playbook, using Ahch-To instead of Tython, and focusing on the Prime Jedi, the first individual to ever call themselves a Jedi 25,000 years ago. And just that fact alone should put into perspective how important this project really is, how they can't afford to mess it up. It would be an era-defining movie. It would replace The Phantom Menace as the earliest chronological Star Wars film in the timeline. I mean, you're literally laying the foundations and setting the rules of the very first Jedi, the first adherents of the Ashlar. And just before we dive into the article itself, I have to wonder if this is part of a wider Lucasfilm initiative to clean house under the new administration. Dave might be going through the entire catalogue, the entire roster of Kathleen Kennedy projects, those that were announced or indefinitely delayed, and just putting them out of their misery for good. Dawn of the Jedi might just be the first, but not the last. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean these movies don't have potential, or that some of the early developed ideas were bad, but more so that Filoni wants to go a different creative route, especially when it comes to a story about the origins of the Jedi Order. That to me sounds incredibly Dave Filoni-esque. Someone who's handled crazy mystical Force concepts in the Clone Wars with the Mortis gods, in Ahsoka with Peridia, Force visions, introducing the Bendu into the mix. This is one of the movies I can't imagine Dave Filoni wanting to delegate. Either it's canned, or he wants to do it himself. Or, you know, at the very least, someone who adheres to a similar creative vision, in the legacy of George Lucas's philosophy. Now, when it was first announced, Dawn of the Jedi was considered one of the few Star Wars movies poised to do everything from scratch, a very unique concept with enormous freedom. And before today, our most recent update for the movie came from Kathleen Kennedy herself, who back in January during her goodbye interview said that Mangold and Willimon turned in a script, and she described it as incredible and breaking the mold. But she also warned us the movie's on hold, and she didn't know when and if it would ever come to fruition. Mangold had other priorities, Willimon was working on some other stuff, and a few days ago, so March 2026, the news broke from HBO that Willimon would be writing a Game of Thrones movie. And so with this update, insider Jeff Snyder was asked about Dawn of the Jedi, if he heard about any updates and the status of the project, and he responded, he just heard it's dead. Not conclusively, because he says he still needs to reach out to his source, but Mangold has a lot of other projects before he's ever going to get a chance to do his Star Wars movie. The Swamp Thing, the Timothée Chalamet heist movie, and with the news of Willimon taking on the Game of Thrones project, it's not going to be for a hot minute, and so for all intents and purposes, there's a good chance it's been canned. But this is where things get very bizarre, because Jeff Snyder is not the only person who heard that the movie is dead. Earlier that day, a Twitter account known as Fives Walker, who's been on top of accurate leaks for Ahsoka, for Mando, said, quote, "I'm hearing that James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi is dead. Double dead. Properly in the bin." So something might have happened behind the scenes. And according to our good friend Bespin Bulletin, given we now have new leadership at Lucasfilm, it looks like they've decided to exit. Hopefully we get clarity on the situation soon. And do you know what this means? If James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi is gone, that means that every major Star Wars movie announced at Star Wars Celebration in 2023 in London is either indefinitely delayed or cancelled. Because you have Mangold's movie, which Kathy described as the ancient past, Dave Filoni's Mandoverse film, and the Rey movie by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. None of those films seem to be coming anytime soon. After Kathy stepped down, there were lots of reports saying that Filoni's movie is no longer happening, or is dependent on The Mandalorian and Grogu. Depending on the performance, it's up in the air if Lucasfilm is going to continue the Mandoverse. But it's no longer a certainty, my friends. For the longest time we assumed that was the next logical thing after Ahsoka's second season. But now, most of the movies announced under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership have a giant question mark next to them. And despite Daisy Ridley always telling us the Rey movie is still coming, there is little indication Lucasfilm is starting production on it anytime soon. So if this is true, it's 3 for 3. A little bit embarrassing, but also maybe a sign of change, maybe a sign of hope. And like I keep saying, this is why they need to outline a concrete plan at the next celebration. Under this new administration, what is on the roster? What are they announcing? And are they actually going to make it happen? All eyes on you, Dave. But what do you guys think? Is it a good thing Dawn of the Jedi was cancelled? Was this a movie you were looking forward to? Let me know down below. And may the Force be with you, always.